This week's guest is someone who truly embodies professionalism, focus, and the passion for the martial arts community, Kathryn Altman. We first crossed paths at the Ishinru Hall of Fame, but more recently at the 2025 Ishinru Hall of Fame, and it was clear that her mindset and dedication set her apart. In this episode, Kathryn shares her incredible 14-year martial arts journey starting from a self-defense class at a summer camp that completely changed her life. She talks about balancing her pursuit of a PhD in clinical psychology with teaching and competing, showing what real discipline looks like inside and outside the dojo. She opens up about preparing for the Maccabiah Games, one of the largest athletic events in the world, and how she stays grounded through mental training, focus, and resilience. You'll also hear about the powerful mentorship she's received from Kim Platt, Marvin Carmona, and her instructors, and how she's paying it forward to be the next inspirational martial arts instructor. This conversation is about growth, mentorship, and the mindset it takes to chase excellence. Don't miss it. Let's sit back and enjoy. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Kumite Lifestyle. And today we're joined by Kathryn Altman. Kathryn, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. And just so the viewers know, I recently had your instructor, Kim Platt, on the show. And Kim and I had a nice chat just about martial arts life and just the mindset of what it takes to be successful. And when, I was texting her, I said, hey, I reached out to Kathryn, and she said, yeah, I think she would be a great fit. I said, all right, let's do it. So it was nice to have your sensei's blessing in this
Yeah.
case.
To be clear, my sensei is also Hanshi Carmona.
Sure.
Platt and I both grew up under him. But yeah, I mean, she's been a huge inspiration to me my whole karate journey. She's a few years older than me. I grew up assisting the classes she was teaching. She really was very formative in, who I've become as a martial artist. So getting to watch her episode and kind of see her get her flowers for all the amazing work she's doing has been great.
Yeah, thank you so much for watching that and just for the positive feedback. And yes, huge shout out to Hanshi Carmona and what you guys are doing over there in New Jersey.
Yeah.
So let's kind of backtrack. So just so the viewers know, I'm from Delaware, so New Jersey, Delaware are right next to each other,
Yes.
and I feel like I've seen a lot of what Hanshi Carmona has done with his students, and even Sensei Platt, and just more recently at the Hall of Fame, because you guys, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you guys got Dojo of the Year this past cycle. Is that true?
Pure did. So Renchi Platt's dojo, Pure MMA,
Yes.
did. Hanchi, is head instructor of New Jersey Martial Arts Academy, but then he also runs the organization Shinjitsu Kurin Kai, which encompasses a few different dojos, including Pure. And so, Pure is part of our organization. So I like to say a win for them is a win for all of us. So that was
Absolutely.
exciting.
Yeah, so I love that team mentality, and we could definitely talk about that
Yeah.
as we move forward for this podcast. But Kathryn, let's start with you. When did you first start training martial arts? And do you remember why you started training?
Yeah, so I didn't start until I was 10. And when I was little, my brother did Taekwondo. And so I was very averse to doing martial arts because I
Yeah.
was very much like a younger sibling. Anything he's doing, I got to be different. But then when I was about 10, I took a self-defense class at sleepaway camp, actually, and loved it. And when I came home from camp, in a very kind of confusing turn to my parents, I was like, put me in karate. Like that was the best thing ever.
Yeah.
And so we started looking for dojos, and I found New Jersey Martial Arts Academy actually through like a county fall festival called Sakasani Days, just like a county fair. They had like a prize wheel. I spun the prize wheel, won a free mouse pad with, Hachi Carmona's face on it and the number for the dojo, called the number and, kind of never stopped.
That's awesome. So it was that one moment in time at the sleepover you said, right? Or
And a sleepaway camp.
I'm sorry, yeah, yeah. So the small moment at the sleepaway camp where it kind of just changed everything, and here you are now. And just so the viewers know, how long have you been training martial arts?
14 years, so I'm 24.
That's crazy. So for anyone listening, I feel as kids, especially in today's generation, to stay committed to something for so long and
Yeah.
that passion, that's a testament of who you are, and more importantly, your instructors and of course your family. So, Kathryn, let's talk about your early days training because it kind of stems and kind of leads to who you are today. But when you first walked into the dojo, maybe not your first class or maybe your first couple classes, but what was that like? And talk us through training as a young kid to like where you are now.
Yeah, I mean, I remember my first class was Kumite, was a fight night class actually. And I remember the black belt who was teaching that class, Mr. Lance Burstler, uh, lent me his daughter's gear and let me fight on my first class. And I had no idea what I was doing. And that whole kind of first period of time when I started, I just remember like a whirlwind of information. I like to think about it as like drinking from a fire hose, like you're just getting so much information thrown at you and you can't get all of it right when you start, but you just kind of take in as much as you can and learn and learn and learn, and have those role models that you look up to. And then eventually, you kind of don't even notice how much time has passed until you look back and you're like, oh, wow, like now, I'm a role model for someone, or now, I used to be able to, am now doing this thing that I never used to be able to do. Like, that's just kind of how it progresses, I guess.
No, I think that's awesome. And I love the fact that you used the fire hose analogy. I use something similar in class when I talk about like a sponge. So if you take a sponge and you wet it and you rinse it, all the knowledge, or I'm sorry, all the water that's leaving
Yeah,
is knowledge that you weren't ready to accept that day.
that's good. Yeah.
But it's but it's still a little damped, But no, that's awesome how you've kind of made the connection where, you're coming, you're learning, and that first day class for anyone that starts anything, it can be overwhelming. But I feel that when you're in a safe, structured environment, it just makes learning so much better. And I just said this in my last pod that people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And when you have instructors that care about you, oh my goodness, it makes learning endless. And you mentioned how you've had such a good connection with Sensei Platt, and we can definitely talk about that here a little bit here in a sec. But so talk about like what was a groundbreaking moment in your, I would say, your early development years of training when you said to yourself, or maybe it was a conversation you had with your parents or your instructors, and you said, this is something that I want to do now for like for the rest of my life, if you will. Because not everyone sticks with karate,
No,
unfortunately.
that's
But
a good question.
yeah,
Um, I think that I don't know if I can come up with one. I think more from my experience, it was more kind of a system of like recommitting to karate at different life milestones in my life, right? So
yeah,
when I was growing up, like when you're a kid, it's a lot of fun. You're playing a lot of games. And I think that any good instructor, I know you've talked about this on previous podcasts, can kind of like gamify really difficult things so you learn it.
yeah,
And I remember, I guess, one moment when I was about 12 or 13. I think I was 12 and I wanted to join the 13 and up class. And I had a conversation with Hanchi Carmona and my parents. He was like, you're not 13 yet, like you're still a kid. And I said to him, I was like, I don't want to play like Tiger Tales. It's one of the games we play. Like, I want to train. Like, I'm
yeah.
serious about this and I want you to see that. And he did. And he let me join, like the older class. And I remember that as a really big moment, just kind of as I became a teenager, started growing towards being a young adult in martial arts, as kind of a moment of like committing to it in a more serious way.
Yeah, and it's like as we transcend in our own journey, right? There's certain like plateaus that we want to overcome. It's like we're always looking for the next thing, the next step, or the next like what's next for us. And I think for you, like you just mentioned, like when you got Hancha Carmona's permission to go to that next level, while it might not be big for anyone else that's kind of watching
Big
from
for
the
me.
outside
Yeah.
in, for you, it was everything. So no, that's awesome. So was there ever a groundbreaking moment in your training where like, or actually, like, let me ask this. So, when you're training, what do you enjoy most about the time on the dojo mat?
I love teaching. I'm getting my PhD right now, and so I want to teach as a career outside of the martial arts,
Uh,
as well. I have just always loved teaching kids karate classes, adults too, but I love teaching. I love, I started assisting, kids classes when I was a teenager, got my own class to teach in high school after I got my black belt. Actually took it over from Renchi Platt. I used to assist her Thursday night classes, and then once I got my black belt, she was like, I'm really busy and I have a lot of classes to teach. Do you want to take this one over? I was like, yes. And that stayed, even though I don't get to do as much teaching these days, just because I don't live in New Jersey right now. It's still, every time I'm home, that's the first thing I'm doing is going back to try to, do some classes and get to work with the kids and the students.
I think that's amazing, and I think feel like earlier on you kind of had that niche to want to teach and give back. So it's a testament to your instructors. So you had that motivation earlier on, and you said to yourself, "I want to do that. I want to be the next instructor." So I think that's awesome. And you mentioned how when you got your black belt and you were given permission to teach and taking over for Sensei Platt's class. So talk about those emotions when you teach, or just like how are you still authentic like when you teach, because it can be tough teaching kids to adults. And I know specifically you mentioned kids, but when you're out there teaching a group of, youth athletes or competitors or just your everyday consumer coming in, like what's the message ultimately that you want to convey aside from the curriculum?
Really good question. Yeah, and I think that a lot of that depends on the age range, like you're not gonna kind of approach the life lessons and what you're trying to teach and impart to a 3-year-old the same way you might like a teenager.
Yeah,
But I think at every stage, my kind of philosophy, how I approach my training and also teaching is really what do you get? Obviously, there's two layers, right? There's what are you getting from this? What are you learning in terms of the skills in your body and the kind of self-defense and practical application? But then there's also the, what are you getting from this on like a broader life lesson perspective? And, a lot of times with the little kids, that's something as simple as keeping your hands to yourself or, helping your friends, things like that. But then with the older kids, it's okay, how can you use karate to think more critically about what you're doing? How can you use karate to problem solve, to push yourself, to develop your perseverance, right? And so I think that's kind of how I stay authentic and relevant to the teenagers, especially and the kids when I teach, is not getting too in the weeds about um, karate itself, but really trying to kind of pull out the broader lessons so that we can use karate as a vehicle to develop whatever skills it is that are really, really important to them.
for sure. And you said vehicle, which I love because I feel like the life lessons and the things that we teach them, kids might not remember everything that we taught, but they'll definitely remember how we treated them. And hopefully, as an instructor, the things that we do teach our kids, our students, it can transcend to their everyday life outside of the martial arts. Because the truth is, we don't know how much time we have with our students, and not to get deep here, but we don't know how much time we have just on this earth. So I'm as an instructor myself, I always say like I hope that however much time I get with this student, whether it's a week or 2 weeks or 2 years, I really hope they get the best version of myself. And I see that in you because you have so much passion. Like when you teach, and it's obvious, like I felt that when the at the Hall of Fame when you came up and you said hello, I thought that was pretty special because just to have the courage to like because I've seen you before in the past, but
Yeah,
I don't
we've been
feel like we ever
around.
had a chance to connect. But I thought that was pretty cool, and it just it showed me like as I reflect, man, like dude, I have no doubt that you're awesome with the youth students and the kids that you're privileged to teach. So, Kathryn, let me ask you this: when you're out there teaching, I know it's because you talk about being authentic and when it's you out there teaching, whether it's one kid or 10 kids or like whoever it is, there's a part of you that's very organic and, it's still 100% you. But I wonder, do you take anything from your other instructors? Is there a little bit of Sensei Platt in you when you teach? There's a little bit of Master Carmona. So how does
Oh,
that work?
there, absolutely. Sometimes I'll, be teaching, I'll say something and I'm like, oh my God, that was Hanchi Carmona's words just came out of my mouth. Or like, I think that happens all the time. And I think that's a good thing. I think that it's kind of like the more time you spend learning from someone, yeah, you're learning the material they're teaching you. You're also learning the way they're teaching it to you. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of one of the things that distinguishes like a more basic level, kind of introductory level student from a higher level student is you're able to pick up on not just the knowledge that's being imparted to you, but the way it's being imparted to you, right? And kind of the pedagogy behind it. And I think that's kind of been a lot of my learning under Hanchi Cremona and then Sensei Platt, people like Kyoshi Hans Groman, other instructors and black belts to NGMA is really just kind of taking classes with them and thinking, oh, wait, when they approach this topic in this way, it really worked for me. I wonder if I do that, if it'll really work for another kid. And kind of moving that forward, I think that the more you do that and the more you engage with taking classes as a student of how the teaching is happening, the more it comes out in your own teaching.
Yeah, I agree. Because teaching, it's a very sensitive thing because it's like we only have so much time, as far as, the allotted time on the mat or dojo, whether it's an hour or, 2 hours. But, we want to, give the, most we can, but we don't want to give too much where it confuses the students.
Right.
So,
A balance.
um, yeah, yeah. And I feel like a lot of instructors, even myself, it's easy for us to talk about the good moments or the good times when we teach, kind of pump it up that way. But has there ever been a time when you're teaching where it was hard. Like maybe it was nerve-wracking or you're teaching something new. Or my favorite, you have the parents watching you and now you're dealing all these different emotions. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, I've got a good anecdote for that.
Sure.
I probably the most challenging kind of decision I ever had to make so far in a class I was teaching, kind of like a split second decision. So I had a student who was really just having trouble grasping the concept of control and using control when sparring like smaller kids,
Yeah.
right? And you see this a lot. I think when you teach, elementary, middle school age kids, they go through these growth spurts, all of a sudden they're gigantic compared to how they were 2 weeks ago, and they're hitting kids really hard, and they're not doing it on purpose, but it's happening, right? And you're trying to balance kind of building up their self-confidence and their training with the safety of other students on the mat. And so I did have a situation where I had to bench a kid for the rest of class because he
Oh
was
no.
kind of out of control and he was frustrated because, things weren't working in his body like they used to. And he was hitting really hard and kids were getting injured. And I had to bench him. And I turned around, his mom was watching me. And I was like, oh my God, like she's gonna be so mad. And I looked at her and she just kind of looked at me and went, and
Yeah.
I just had this moment of like, okay, like, right, that was very good reinforcement and very much like, all right, she sees that I'm doing this as a way to try to help her son, help him kind of learn how to regulate his emotions and his behaviors, not as a punishment. And so it all worked out okay, but it was very stressful.
Yeah, and it goes back to caring because you care enough about that student to really like say, hey, this is what happened, this is what you need to learn, and going back to the mom looking at you because that can be very because that can go south real quick. And I think, just building that rapport over time, I'm sure she knew that because it came from a place of love and place of understanding, like there's no reason for her to get upset.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that countless times over the years, and I like so like I always share this story. Like my first time really teaching, I was like 15 or 16, and I just got my black belt, and I was teaching a group of green belts. And long story short, I'm teaching, and I'm right in front of the parents, and I see Master Rigby, who's my instructor. So I'm struggling because it's like, all right, like I'm teaching the kids Shinto, and usually when you teach students yours, there's always feedback. Catherine, there was no feedback to be given because I was so nervous. I just get, all right, guys, do it again, do it again, do it again.
Right.
And I
Yep.
see Master Ribby looking at me, and then I'm worried about the parents. So class gets done. Oh, which by the way, that was all 10 minutes, but it felt like an eternity.
That feels
So
like an hour. Oh yeah.
yeah. So class gets done, and I walk up to Master Rigby. I say, hey, so uh how did I do? And he was just thinking, what do you mean? I was just like, oh, did you watch me? He said, no, I wasn't watching you. I was just like, oh my goodness. So the whole time I thought you were looking, which I mean, I'm sure he was, but like, he's scanning the room. And then I've learned that, with parents, and this is a great tip for anyone that teaches any sports or any realms in that, kind of facet where like parents, for the most part, they trust that you're going to
Yeah.
do what you've been assigned to do, and especially when it comes to self-defense, they want the best for their kids, and it's kind of like a relaxing moment for them because they get to sit back and not I mean of course they're their parents, but they don't have to say much. They can just watch. So I think that was a humble turning point for me when I realized like no, the parents are on our side, and when you get them on
Yep.
their side, it's so much better. But now it's cool that you shared that story.
Yeah, I like what you said about like rapport building, right? Because, if a kid walks in and on their first day you're, you know, uh, being hard on them or, making them sit on the side, like all these things, the parent has no reason to trust you, right? They don't know who you are yet.
Yeah.
But if, kind of over time, over years of working with students, you develop these relationships where parents and the students themselves see that you really do have their best interest at heart. And then you
Yeah.
get a little bit more trust, a little bit more flexibility to kind of, you know, run your class the way that you feel you need to, knowing that you have the parents' trust built in already.
I
I think.
agree. And I compare that to kind of making a deposit in the bank, right?
Mm,
Because you have to have money to withdraw. And I feel like when you have a brand new student, it's like I know how like I know how good you are. The instructors know how good you are and the other students that have been there, but a brand new student doesn't know. So I feel like before you make any correction, you got to deposit, deposit, deposit. And then when you know them for a while, you can say like, hey, everything looks good, but fix your
got it.
stance because they've already have that trust. I think that's
Yeah.
awesome that you can, also break that down too, because it's important because, teaching isn't just yelling. It's not the old school Cobra Kai type,
Right. Yeah.
So now let's So you talked about teaching and how much you love that, but I also know there's a side of you that loves competing. So let's talk about your competition side, Catherine, and let's start with, well, when did you start competing? And was that something that you initially wanted to do?
Gosh, when did I start competing? Probably around 2012, 2013-ish. Hanchi Carmona every year would have an in-house just Shiai tournament and demonstration. And so I would always do that, just kind of intra-house, with my classmates. And then kind of as the years went on, I joined the tournament team and we'd go to more local and regional competitions. But competing was never my big thing, coming up through the time I graduated high school. I would compete to all three kata, kumite, and then once I started training weapons, kobudo.
Yeah.
Um, and I could usually count on a medal in kobudo, sometimes kata. Competition, point fighting was never my thing. I always did it, through high school 'cause it was very important to Hanchi that we were all, well-rounded competitors, and I agree with that. But I always competed just as an aside, as a very small part of my martial arts. It was never kind of the main focus. And it's become more of a focus since graduating college, which is something I had never expected. So that's really been kind of a whirlwind journey because coming up through the ranks and through NJMA, I was never known as like, oh, Catherine, like she's a competitor. I was known for other things. So
Yeah.
that's definitely been a transition.
No, that's awesome. And I love how you said that Hanchi Carmona wanted you to become a well-rounded martial artist. So even if it wasn't something that you weren't necessarily a fan of, but you
Did
still
it.
got out there and you still did it. And I commend you for that, because just stepping out to compete, just in general in any area of life, it takes courage to do that. So I always give hats off to anyone, especially in karate tournaments like the last one that we were all at, the Tennessee, especially the little kids. I love seeing little
Yeah.
kids out there competing because they don't care. It's like, or meaning like they don't have that fear base that we get
Right. They're
like
not fe
later
or like
on in
afraid of
life.
failure. Yeah.
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 Where unfortunately as adults, like I don't know where we start getting. Actually, I do. As competitors, we don't want to lose. So
It's what you start winning.
naturally,
Yeah.
so naturally we kind of start like, okay, like I'm out here competing. I don't want to lose. I want to win. Whether you look at it like, as a pro or a con, I think there's areas where, you're gonna be successful and there's, areas in life where you're not gonna be. And you touched on, the Kumite not being your favorite and maybe not being known as a competitor, but I mean, you're still out there doing it. And had you not competed or had you not been at the Hall of Fame, we wouldn't be even
Yeah.
having this discussion.
Connected.
So it's
Yeah, no,
crazy how things come out of it. Go ahead.
yeah, I just think that, even if I mean now competition is a slightly bigger part of, my martial arts career at the moment, but even when it wasn't, back when I was growing up, I think that um it's important as kind of a skill builder for kids, I when I was interviewing at PhD programs, I got into a lot of conversations with faculty at different schools about, personal kind of strengths and weaknesses. And something I'd always say was, well, I know how to lose. I'm like a really good loser because I lost all the time. And I think that like when I was a kid, I'm growing up, and I think that gave me a very kind of a mindset that's very open to criticism and to not succeeding and still trying and still trying and still trying. That now as an adult is kind of feeding into other areas of my life, but that really started through martial arts.
Yeah, Sensei Platt said it best on her podcast, and you said something that really resonated in memory where, it's the flash in the pan, people that
Yeah.
don't have to work, they're the ones that, quit, where someone like yourself, and you just admitted it saying like you
I
weren't always
lost for a
doing,
very long time.
but I feel like, I mean, we could substitute the word lost for learn. Like you learned
Yeah.
so much in that time period, which is why I feel like you're very resilient in that sense. It's like you can bounce back much quicker
Yeah.
than someone that's never had that setback. And we see it all the time in sports, right? Kids go off to college and, they might have had success in their high school sport. They lose one time. What happens, because they've never dealt with that. And it's, while it's unfortunate that you weren't always able to get the success that you wanted or, that victory, but ultimately you got so much more out of it. And I think that's really transcended into
Yeah.
your, early adulthood. So how many tournaments have you done? Like if you can recall.
I mean, growing up, I would do a few a year. Always the in-house tournament and then a couple others. And then, in college, I was in college during COVID, 2019 to 2020 was my freshman year. So,
Gotcha.
nothing. And then really after college, I I mean, I don't compete a lot. I'd say I try to hit maybe like four or so a year, because I've got goals that I'm working towards, but I'm balancing that with being a working adult, right? Where martial arts, as much as I would love it if that could be, what pays the bills, it's not. So,
Yeah, at least not
I'm
yet.
kind of balancing it. Not right now. So I'm kind of balancing it.
That's awesome. No, the reason why I asked how many tournaments was because I wanted to ask, like, is there a competition that really stands out to you? Maybe it was because I say this all the time to my students and people that I've had on the podcast when we talk about competition. Man, like growing up and even till now, I don't remember how I did at every tournament or each one just because it's so kind of vague. But Kathryn, I do remember the road trips and just the
Oh yeah.
adventures. So I'm curious, like for you, what was a profound or a memory that will stick with you forever? When we talk about, competition and just traveling to tournaments.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I think so my senior year of high school, I went down to Tennessee for Gat that was my first Gatlinburg. I'd never been to Hall of Fame before.
Yeah.
Because I really didn't do the travel tournaments. I only did the local New Jersey ones growing up. But I was nominated for Karateka of the Year. And so I went down and with my mom and we were on this tiny little plane flying into, the small airport, driving to, through the mountains to Gatlinburg in the middle of nowhere. We're like, what is going on? What have I gotten myself into?
Yeah, it's
And
definitely not New Jersey anymore.
no, I was like, we are not in Northern New Jersey. But just the experience of, I remember kind of sitting with the team at the banquet, and I won Junior Karateka of the Year that year. And that was kind of the first competition award I'd ever won. So that was a really big deal for me. And then it was pouring outside, and we had to get back to our hotel. And so Shihan Cremona, Hanshi Cremona's wife, found us giant trash bags, and we like ripped face holes in them and put trash bags over our like nice banquet outfits and like the awards and the certificates, then ran back to the hotel in this like deluge in the trash bags. And so I remember that more clearly than the actual tournament itself, just because that was such like a team bonding moment.
Yeah, and those are memories that you don't get unless you're actually there with the
Yeah.
team. That's pretty cool. It's like yeah, the winning or the competing itself, that's such a small part of the
Yeah.
traveling part, but that's awesome that you were sharing that. And I love the I love the part you mentioned about you and your mom traveling through the mountains and probably thinking this is definitely not the East Coast anymore, mom.
Like, where are we? No, but I mean, I definitely like I'd never been to that part of the country until I got to go for karate, right? And I went to AAU Nationals this past summer in Fort Lauderdale. I'd never been to that part of the country until I
Yeah.
got to go for karate, right? So I think that kind of getting to expand your horizons and travel different places is a really underrated aspect of competition.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that you just mentioned the AAU because that's been something that I've been talking about as of late with different people. I did AAU way back in the I mean not way back, but probably like 2010 time. So I was on the US national team and I loved being able to compete and just, just grow from that experience. I only did it for about a couple years. So I'm curious for you, how did you do at the AAU nationals?
Um, not wonderful. It was a learning experience.
Absolutely.
It was okay. It was a last minute decision to go. I was supposed to be competing internationally last July, and the competition, like for Team USA, and the competition got postponed. And
Mm,
so the coach for that team, Sensei Avi Azule, is big in the AAU.
yeah,
And so once the tournament got postponed, the international one, he emailed us and he was like, "Hey, come to AAU Nationals." And so, with like a week in advance, I bought tickets down to Florida. I was still trying to figure out how to like pay my rent for that month because I had canceled my lease because I had thought that I was going to be traveling for the month. And so I was trying to re-up my lease and figure out how to get to Fort Lauderdale. And just all this, it was chaos. I got
crazy,
down
right?
there, and I had a ton of nerves. Um, so I came in, I called it my So Close tournament because I came in the open kata division, was it ninth in the round of 16, top eight move on. I was ninth by like 2/100ths of a point or something. And then I was fourth in Kobudo by like a few tenths. So it
Oh
was
man.
so close, which, can be very frustrating, but it was still a really good experience. And I got to go to the Sandra Sanchez seminar at that competition as well. So I said, no matter how well I do or how well I don't do, like Sandra Sanchez looked me in the eyes and gave me a correction, and like that's the most amazing thing ever. So,
Yeah,
taking something away from it.
100%. And goes back to like the memories or the things that kind of define our competition experience. And like you said, going to that seminar and um yeah, for anyone that's watching and that doesn't really understand the caliber of AAU athletes and just the overall experience. AAU it's the Amateur Athletic Union, and they have a lot of different sports, and karate being one of their um, entities. It's just there's a lot of great athletes there, and I just had Shelby Milliken on the podcast. She's like the rising star of karate, and even they were saying like even her parents were saying like it's such a great event. And when I was going through, I had of course my instructors, but I had Coach John and Cindy Ingram down in Florida, and they were huge on my growth and mindset. Um,
They
but
were
no, like,
incredible. Because
yeah,
I went down with one other student from New Jersey Martial Arts Academy, and it was just the two of us. And so the Ingrams really took us under their wing.
yeah, they
They
take
let us
you
march
in.
in with them. They were
Yeah,
absolutely incredible and so gracious.
yeah, and it's things like that that you're always going to remember about people because you remember how they made you feel and they made you feel welcome. When I was kind of in my high on my heydays for the AAU, I was prepping for Italy, and my mom was like, "Hey, if you're gonna do this, like, let's get you out there, training with some of the best people that we
Yeah.
can." And Master Rugby was, phenomenal back here in Delaware, but they flew me out to Florida for a couple of weeks, and I would stay with the Ingrams, and I learned so much, Catherine, just about the AAU mindset, being a competitor, and just really being grateful for the moment. Like, man, I get to, like, I don't have to be out here. Like, I get to be
That's
out
it.
here,
I love that. Yeah.
So, you talked about your results at the competition. Now, you said something a little bit earlier than that. So, you were getting ready to go to overseas to
Mhm.
compete. Was that with the AAU team?
No, that was with the USA Maccabiah team, which is the international competition I was mentioning to you
Yeah.
earlier. And so that was supposed to be at the same time as AAU Nationals, and it got postponed, which is a whole other can of worms that I can get into.
Sure. So yeah, I did want to talk about that because when we initially talked at the Hall of Fame, I remember you mentioning that you were getting ready to travel to overseas. So that's one of the main caveats of why I wanted to have you on was to give you this platform to talk about that experience. So let's start from the beginning. So you get the invite or you get the news that you've been accepted. So now what are you feeling and like what's next as far as like the preparation that goes into that?
Yeah, so the way it worked with Maccabiah, and for those who don't know, I don't know if you want me to kind of just give a quick
Absolutely.
synopsis. Yeah,
Yeah.
what that is. Maccabiah is an international organization. It's the Maccabiah Games or Maccabiah Games. There's some discourse on how to pronounce it. Is the third largest athletic gathering in the world behind the Olympics and the FIFA World Cup.
Yeah.
It's basically an Olympic style multi-sport competition for Jewish athletes from it's got a very similar layout to the Olympics of opening ceremonies, 2 weeks of various sports and competitions, closing ceremonies with all countries represented, but all the athletes we all share kind of this shared Jewish culture and heritage, and so it's both a really cool experience to get to represent your country and also a really cool way to connect with athletes and people from around the world who share both your culture as well as the shared love for sport and competition and all of that. So in September of 2024, I attended the like tryout camp for to the team selection camp, basically training camp.
Yeah.
Selected for the team, which is incredibly exciting.
Yeah.
Something I'd been working for a few years, so I was really thrilled. And then we had a training camp in May, and then we were supposed to leave on July 1st to go abroad and to compete. And then 10 days before we were supposed to leave, the competition got canceled. Or not canceled, excuse me. The competition got postponed until next summer
Oh
due to
man.
just, politics and regional conflicts and things that are happening overseas. And so that was just devastating because
Sure.
when you train and you get it,
Yeah.
competed for AU and on these big stages. When you're competing for a specific event, you're really pacing your training in a specific way so that you peak at the right time.
Yeah.
Um, and not to sound like I'm complaining about being old, but like I'm 24, I'm not 16. Like my joints were tired, my knees were tired. So I was like, oh God, like now I have to keep doing this at this level for another year without taking a break, to keep
Yeah,
going.
yeah.
Um, but it's worth it. It's such an incredible opportunity. So that's kind of where we're at right now, and I'll go at the start of July in 2026 instead.
That, that's right. Yeah. So, it's unfortunate that it did get pushed back, but it's just there's just so many things in our life that we don't have control of,
Yeah.
which is a lot, as they say. So, at least now you can take that as an opportunity, like you said, to prepare, and now you have more time. So
Yeah.
there's really no, as they say, there's no excuse why you can't be overly prepared. And you mentioned something about as we get older, it's like, yeah, our our body doesn't move the way it does when we were in high school. So, but I think you'll be fine, Kathryn. I think knowing you just in the small, professional setting that I do, like I'm super excited for you. And man, what a great opportunity to not only represent your dojo, but like your country. That's
Yeah, thank you. I'm
You're
really excited.
welcome.
Yeah, also just to represent like Ishiner, because I think there's kind of a dearth of Ishiner on the world stage in terms of karate. And there's people out there, like you mentioned, Shelby, right? She's big up and coming in the AAU doing Ishinru. And I just think that the more we can get out there and kind of show who we are in the world of martial arts, the better. And so the opportunity to do that and represent Ishinru and JMA, and all of that, as well as just the communities I'm from, like with the synagogues that I'm a part of that have supported me, it's just an amazing opportunity.
Yeah, and it's like martial arts karate has been like an additional vehicle in your life. It's helped you go to so many different places.
The use of vehicle again. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
No, that's awesome. So when you're preparing for any competition, because I know you mentioned that you talked about competing like locally in New Jersey there for a while, and then transitioning to the bigger stages in Tennessee, and now the world stage here coming up within the next calendar year. What's your preparation like? So I know there's the physical side of training, and you mentioned how you got to, still keep up with that rigorous training and not being complacent, but now it's like, okay, now it's more time you have to stay consistent. But
Yeah.
I'm curious, from an athlete standpoint, I'm going to ask you too. So how do you prepare physically and how do you prepare mentally? Because it is two different things, but they definitely go hand in hand.
Yeah, it's a good question. Physically, I mean, the way that I'm training right now is definitely a little bit atypical, maybe. I'm working with Sensei John Myers a lot. Hachi
Yeah.
Carmona connected me with him when I started
Yep.
kind of training for these open non-issuer competitions. And so I'm in Cleveland right now, right? So I don't really have access to like the dojo, the physical mat, the physical space. And so I work out actually in my living room. I move all my furniture aside and get on FaceTime with Sensei Myers twice a week, and train for about an hour and a half twice a week with him. And then on days that I'm not doing that, I go to the gym and lift, I run, I train on my own. Whenever I'm get the chance to be home in New Jersey, I'm hitting the dojo and training with Hachi Carmona, but those times are fewer and further between than I'd like. So it's a lot of just kind of training by myself or online with somebody, um, for the physical side of things. And then also things such as making sure I'm getting enough sleep, right? I think we underemphasize sleep, nutrition, hydration, and all that when we're training our athletes and telling them, kind of best practices. So I really try to emphasize those things.
Yeah.
Uh, I think that's kind of it on the physical side. And then on the mental side, I have a playlist called Hype Music. That's all just like classic rock and music that, makes me excited. And when I travel to competitions, the morning of, before I, get in gi and go to the venue, I put on my playlist and I dance around the hotel room for a while to kind of dance all the nerves out and get myself into like a kind of excited but relaxed mindset. And so that's kind of been a routine I got myself into all the way back in high school. That's been very helpful. And then just trying, and I'm still working on this. I think mental preparation is very challenging, but just trying to,
Yeah.
once you're there and you're in the venue, just kind of get your mind off things and not overthink things at that point. Very little is in your control, right? And the only thing you can control is going out on the mat and what you do. So it doesn't really benefit you to sit there and watch everybody else and stress about, how everybody else is doing. 'Cause you can't control that. You can only control how you do.
Yeah.
And if Haji Cremona or Sensei Myers are watching this, they're gonna laugh and say I'm sounding very hypocritical because I don't take that advice very well, but I'm trying to, so that's
Yeah.
kind of what I'm trying to do.
It's always like we know what to do, but we have an idea, but it's actually executing it can be tough. It's easy to preach the right things, but sometimes it's harder to actually embody that. But no, like I love that you shared, the physical side and just staying very active. And you said something that really resonates, where a lot of people, even athletes, even just humans, like we don't hydrate enough, we're not sleeping. And I've learned lately that just a lack of sleep can really
Yeah,
downplay your performance. And it's something that I even have to work on, which is a totally different topic for a different day. But, it's just knowing that there's things that can improve. It's that 1% better that we talk about,
yep,
than the mental side. And isn't it interesting, Kathryn, how we train like our lives or not our lives, but months, years, which can seem like a lifetime for a small moment, right? And while that moment was big, really in the long scheme of things, it really wasn't that big. It's not that big of a deal that people make it out to be. But I've learned that if it's important to you, then it 1,000% does matter. So
yeah. Sensei Azule, he's the team coach for Maccabi USA's karate team.
yeah,
He once said to me something along the lines of like, he thinks that doing kata in competition is much harder than kumite because not because of the actual physical demands of either or, but because with kata you get one chance, right? And if you screw one thing up, you have, one bobble, one misstep, that's kind of it. Whereas in kumite, you do have a little bit more, okay, first point got scored on you, you can come back from that. And so I think there's a mental game to kata in terms of people who tend to love it are perfectionists. We
yeah.
want to get everything. You get it. You're a kata guy. For your Saison at the Hall of Fame, which was fantastic.
Thank you.
We want to be perfect. We want to get it 100% right, and we do it 100% right in training on the mat, in the dojo, a million times. But then it all kind of comes down to when you're on the mat in competition, you have to do it 100% that one time, and that's where the mental challenge is.
Yeah, that's almost like the itch of why we do what we do, because we want to be in that moment or in kind of like that spotlight. And as a competitor, there's a little bit of you that has to be selfish because if you don't want it, because no one's going to want it more than you. And
Yeah.
like your coaches, your family can say, "Oh, I want you to go out there and win." That's all great, but sometimes you got to cancel that out. That's just background noise. It comes down to like, man, like Catherine, how much do you want it that day? And that's something that I've had to learn as a competitor, and it's just been fun. These are lessons that I can take moving forward and I can share with the next generation. And you said so yourself, teaching is something that we kind of have that vehicle, if you will, to give back to the next generation.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we had a chance to just, talk about your mindset when it comes to the preparation, which I think is amazing. So let's kind of dive into another sphere of your life. So when you're not competing, so I know you just mentioned you just moved, but when you're not doing karate, and we can kind of shift back a little bit to high school, even like,
Yeah.
early college, but like what do you do when you're not physically doing karate? Because I know you always think about karate because we're
Yeah.
lifelong martial artists, but what do you enjoy aside from, the martial arts itself?
Yeah, I mean, well, right now, where I'm at in life, I just started, I think I mentioned it, a PhD program here in Cleveland. I'm getting my degree in clinical psychology so that I can, be a doctor, professor, psychologist, what have you.
Yeah.
And so, that's a very large time commitment. So a lot of my time is spent, in the lab doing research and in classes, and, I'll be starting my clinical training and all of that. And so finding the balance between this thing that I love, which is martial arts, with this career path that I'm passionate about,
Yeah.
um, is very challenging. And what I've been finding is the way to balance that is to actually just pursue third things, and do other things so that my life is not being wholly consumed by one of the two, And so I have a cat. I like to hang out with her. I like to read. I like to go for walks. I like to run, like just finding little things to do kind of outside of these two things that take up so much of my life, I found is really, really important.
Yeah, I think balance is key. And I'm glad that you shared that because, I mean, how many times do we see in any area of life people are focused on one particular thing and it's good to have that, but I and just if we're being real, I don't think there's a thing called being balanced. It's just more of a shift of focus because you can't do 50%, 50% because then you're
Yeah,
not putting 100% and everything else. So I
that's
think
true.
it's important to kind of have that separation. And I love that you're very focus driven, goal driven on what you're doing. And you're at a great time in your life where you can do that thing. And, martial arts is always going to be there. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. So, like, what are your goals within the next 5 years? So I know you're talking about your profession and how you want to, continue that, and you talk about martial arts. And I'm just knowing you based on this conversation, I know you kind of have an idea of where you want to be, and we never know where life's going to take us. But where do you see yourself in the next 5 years, Kathryn?
It's a good question. It's a really good question. I mean, my goals are kind of in terms of next year, my goal is to be winning gold at Maccabiah, right?
Oh
After
yeah.
that, my goals are to be, progressing in the PhD program. I want to graduate 20 in around 2030, and have my doctorate and kind of a goal of mine where I see myself eventually wanting to go is I would love to merge the two things. I want to find a way to integrate martial arts and these things that I love about it, the competition, the teaching, with psychology and intervention science and, child development. I actually wrote my kind of a research statement for graduate school about my experience in the martial arts and teaching karate as a way to promote child development
Yeah.
in kids, especially kids, who might not be typically developing, kids with ADHD, autism, things like that. And so, kind of a big, super abstract life goal of mine is to find a way to make a career combining the two, in some capacity. So,
Man, that's awesome. I love how you mentioned about the child development because it definitely goes hand in hand with, with
yeah,
the martial arts. So no reason why you can't do any of that. And I know that you'll definitely be successful and, wherever you go is, just based on what you're sharing. I think it's cool to meet someone who's, because you said you're 24, right? And
yep,
that's very passionate, very driven because I mean, I hate to say it, but this generation now, especially coming up, it's kind of like hit or miss. It's like, because I was not to change topics, but I want to kind of share something about, and this is actually giving credit to you. I was in the store the other day, and I don't know how old this person was, but they had to at least be in college because they were wearing like a college shirt, and they were up at the register, and like they couldn't understand change. They couldn't like money or just transaction. I'm like, what are we doing right now? Like, it's just it's either people have it or they don't. So it's refreshing, Catherine, to know that there's hope for the
yeah.
future generation. And I'm sure you see it. I don't
I mean,
know.
I spent in the last 2 years, I've been teaching a fourth grade Judaic studies class at a synagogue back when I was living in Maryland, and
Yeah.
the fourth graders and seeing just kind of the way the world they're growing up in, as opposed to the world of the early 2000s that I grew up in.
So much has
Um,
changed.
so much has changed, but I think there's hope because I think that you know, we can't emphasize enough how much COVID did to people, especially to young people. I was a freshman in college, right? So I always kind of refer to my age and my kind of generation as like the last boat off a sinking ship, because we
Yeah.
got to experience that really formative kind of period pre-COVID. And I think now the kids coming up, the little kids I taught, they're experiencing that post-COVID and they're going to be okay. And, people who are really struggling, I feel, are ones who were in those formative years during COVID, and had that kind of isolation during what are supposed to be these social and formative years. And I
Yeah.
realize I'm going off on like a social psychology tangent. I'll stop now, but
No,
that's
you're
my
not. And I'm
perspective.
glad that you're sharing that because I mean, look at what the platform we're using now. Like we're talking over a computer, Zoom, if you will,
Yeah.
and it's interesting how because I didn't even know what Zoom was until COVID.
No,
And
me
it's
neither.
and while COVID sucked, I mean, there was definitely things that came from it and just the ability to connect. I think human connection got a lot better,
Yeah.
or I don't want to say better, but we found other ways to stay connected with, with our counterparts. Um, but social media, man, it's crazy. I mean, there's pros and cons, but people nowadays, we talk about the psychology. Some people just can't have conversations like we're having,
Yeah.
and
No, they
that
have to be checking all
and
the
that
time.
is
Yeah.
frustrating to me. It's like you go to a restaurant and you can't even make a simple order, unless you like, look at your phone. I'm like, come on, guys, what are
No,
we
that drives
doing?
me crazy.
Uh,
I like what you brought up about, the increasing connection from the pandemic. Because I think, especially in terms of martial arts, I mean, I've been able to be so much more connected just to New Jersey, to NJMA, everything through Zoom in a way that we didn't have the capacity to do that before. But in a post-COVID world, when we have like planning events or planning meetings, all the black belts for the big events that we put on, Hunter Carmona will drop the Zoom link in the chat and I'll hop on, from Cleveland and be a part of it.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, I work out with Sensei Myers over Zoom, just I think there's ways to use it as this tool to maintain connection, generally, and then especially in martial arts, as we're young people moving all over the place, still wanting to stay entrenched in our roots in our home dojos. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of potential there.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And I love that you see the positive in that because people don't like unless you're using it or unless you've been exposed to it, like I guess staying connected, especially the older generations. I kind of feel for them, like, our grandparents or even, some of the parents that are older, I feel like there's a lost in connection there, but I think Zoom platforms or something like in that nature definitely has
They
kept
help.
us connected. Yeah, like even if it's just a 1% better in helping, because you mentioned John Myers and just being able to connect with him, like that wasn't even a thing, I feel like pre-COVID. I mean, yeah, there was FaceTime and there was other like ways to connect, video through video, but I feel like Zoom is it's more socially appropriate now because I mentioned Zoom. So like when I have guests on, I'm like, yeah, it's just gonna be over Zoom. Like, okay, cool.
Okay, fine. Yeah,
I
everyone
can
knows
do
what that
that.
means. It's
Yeah.
incredible. And I mean, I've seen the people you have on. You've had people from kind of all generations, all walks of life, and everybody's able to navigate and manage this platform, which I think is kind of incredible.
Yes,
Yeah.
because that was kind of my worry because I have some cool guests kind of lined up, like you said, all walks of life, and no one has once said, "How do I use Zoom?" It's like universally accepted now.
Well, yeah, in my research, in my graduate program, we're like implementing Zoom-based um, behavioral and social interventions for kids, with like developmental disorders and just the ability to use Zoom to reach a family who maybe lives in like a super rural town in the middle of nowhere where there's no access to a therapist. Okay, but
Yeah.
now they know how to hop on Zoom because everyone knows how to hop on Zoom and can be a part of these kind of interventions and these healthcare things. And I think that it's just got so much untapped potential.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Catherine, listen, it was so great to have you on. But before we do exit out, you mentioned Kim Platt earlier, or Sensei Platt, I'm sorry. And I know how much she has done for you and what she stands for. So if you want, take a moment to kind of just talk about how amazing she's been in your life so for guys that are watching, Kim Platt was a recent guest of mine. So please check out her podcast and Catherine being kind of an indirect student, but more of a colleague and peer. So, what influences or what positivity has she had in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think I said to you before we started filming, I've been a longtime member of the Kim Platt fan club. And so, I mean, I think that especially growing up as a woman in martial arts, right? It's really, really important to have role models who are women to look up to. And that's something so great about NJMA is there are so many of those, and we have such a strong like female black belt presence. And so Sensei Platt's a few years older than me, and so she was always like the next step of rank that I wanted to get to, right? When I was, like a brown belt or a green belt or a purple belt, brown belt, she was a black belt. When I was
Yeah.
a black belt, she was teaching. Like, I always kind of wanted to get to that next step, which was pretty much wherever she was. And she just kind of always took me under her wing and she was always really good about, just giving me opportunity to learn and to grow and to push myself. And to this day, every time I go out and compete, when I ki in kata competition, she taught me when I was a little kid, okay, you have to pause for long enough to say, let them die in your head. And she taught me that when she was like 16 and I was like 12. And I still, every time I go out on competition, every time I ki, I think that in my head before I move on.
Hmm.
It's just, I think that's such a good example of like just little tangible things that have really stuck with me.
Yeah, I've never heard that saying before. That's clever. That's
Yeah.
awesome. It's things like, you can learn something from everyone. And no, I think it's fantastic that you've had such a good role model in her and Catherine, like you said that, now you get a chance to be that
Yeah.
next that influence, if you will. And that's pretty powerful. It's like the quote from Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. And I mean, like what a awesome opportunity, right, that you have do just
Yeah.
that, and you're going to excel at that. I have no doubt whatsoever.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
I mean, just one of the little girls who I used to teach back when she was like a little kid, at NGMA is testing for her black belt this year. And so that was super surreal for me in terms of like, oh, you know, I am to you what people like Kim Platt were to me. Like, that's crazy. I said to her, oh, like, Kara, when you get your black belt, like you were one of my like students back in the day. I'm so proud of you. Like when you get your black belt, I'm gonna cry. And she said to me, oh, no offense, Miss Altman, you cry all the time. Um, and I just thought that was such a good example of like how comfortable she feels as, a student, a former student of mine, like just kind of having that really strong relationship. And it's, those are the kind of things that I think really drive me in martial arts and the things that are really important.
Absolutely. I agree. Man, it's been awesome. So we had a chance to learn a little bit more about your backstory with your training in New Jersey. So shout out to them, and of course your instructors, Hanshi Carmona and Sensei Kim Platt, and all the other instructors that you mentioned. I think living in gratitude and just recognizing where you come from and never forgetting where you come from is also important. We had a chance to talk about your competition days and some of your favorite moments about driving in the mountains, like, with your mom. I thought that was pretty cool. And your upcoming competition as well within the next
Yeah.
calendar year. So, yeah, we'll definitely look forward to that. And yeah, for sure. So, Kathryn, I thank you for, being on today's Kumite Lifestyle podcast. And before we exit out, I always let my guest give any last minute shout outs to anyone special in their life. And I know you kind of already did that, but if there's anyone you forgot or if you want to, cycle through again, because I feel like we can never give enough thanks and praise, but who would you
Yeah.
like to thank again or now?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that's a great kind of last segment for you to have on your show because I mean, I think in martial arts there's always just so many people who have done so much for you.
Thank you.
So I mean, of course, I'll shout out Hachi Carmona and all the black belts at NJMA. Special shout out also to Kyoshi Groman. He was a huge, huge influence on my Kobudo training and my martial arts training as a whole. And then also Sensei Myers, I train with him now. I see him twice a week and he puts up with me after a long day of, working in the research lab and then coming to train completely brain dead. So that's I'm very, very grateful for him as well. And then just yeah, the students and the families at NGMA and at Pure Karate are just, they're the driving reasons behind why I do what I do in the martial arts. And so I'm just very grateful for all of their support. And yeah,
No, that's awesome. And where can people find you on social media if you feel comfortable sharing that?
it's a good question.
Or maybe just like where can they find like the martial arts school that you train at? Just
Yeah. Um, I'm on social media. I think I'm Kathryn.Altman on Instagram. So you can find me there. And then you can find NJMA. I think it's NJ Martial Arts on Instagram.
yeah. And
And
then pure
then
karate.
you can reference Kim's episode for where to find Pure Karate. Yeah, I think that about covers it.
Awesome. Kathryn, thank you so much for your time today. And
Yeah,
thank you
thank you.
for yeah, yeah, thank you for your time on the Kumite Lifestyle Podcast. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Absolutely.